wholeness and balanced vibration to everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the 2012 show. Today we have an excellent show lined up for you. Of course, it's August the 12th, 2012, and we're just lining things up today, and we really want to get started as fast as possible. So in order to do that, because I'm dealing with another location today, and I just wanted to make sure that our sound is clear before we even get started. So I'm asking anyone in the chat box that if this is coming through loud and clear, just let us know so that we can continue or see if we need to work on sound. Okay, so we got a confirmation that we're coming through loud and clear, so we're going to head and get started here. Oh my goodness, it's just amazing the time that we're in right now, where just a massive amount of awakening is occurring within, and that is starting to bleed into the external reality, and hopefully it will enliven the external reality, meaning the energy that we're able to bring up and the full understanding of self that we're able to accumulate. We want that to spread to the individuals that are around us so that they can awaken also from their slumber. Of course, today's topic of the show is professional reincarnation, which is a really heavy keyword in regards to just how it's put forth. A lot of people would think that having something like professional reincarnation, or where you can guide yourself into your next life or into your next level of existence, would be almost like a blasphemy or a heresy. So I want to set the tone for this conversation first by letting everyone know that together there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. I will also say that inside of your body is a major part of you. So you need to get together with what's going on inside. What's happening with your heart, what's happening with your brain. These things, of when I say together, I don't always mean externally in the reality with lots of people getting together and maybe going to occupy something. What I'm talking about is inside, when you know that your system is working fluidly. Let us begin by first saying, what is free thinking if it produces more stagnancy? I've been seeing now that a lot of free thinking is taking place on the internet. There's a lot of people speaking their mind. And we still have to ask ourselves, how far have we really gone with the message, the information, the application, etc.? Or has it actually made us even more stagnant than before? Maybe in some people's lives, they at least got out more. They saw more things. Even though they were maybe going out to the club and doing different things, they still were on the highway of life. And some people have traded that for being at home and in solitude. And that solitude has made them almost alien to the world, to the point where when they go out, they can't even really commingle or harmonize with the individuals that they have to interact with daily. So this is everything to do with the chakra that we're addressing today, which is the Swadisthana chakra, or the navel chakra. And this is about the unity between opposites and how to allow the opposites to come together to bring forth your manifestation, or what is called your child, your fruit, or your seed. And you have the opportunity to place this in multiple places because you have multiple bodies, as the human is a hyperdimensional entity. So in order to even, again, touch into the subject, it's important that we identify the construct. It's important that people understand exactly where they're at right now. This is what we call triangulation in the segment of the time loop. So right now, the matrix has a continuous growth and a continuous transformation for us, meaning that all of what we're experiencing, whether we can stop it or control it, we're still experiencing. And this is changing us and allowing us to shed old skin and to metamorphosize into new beings. So what's really happening with us now is that we have to move fluidly in this transition. We don't want our energy to bottleneck. We don't want to get stuck. And so I will say, for anyone that is hearing the call, if things are breaking up on your end, maybe because of your connection, also know we do a clear copy of this show so that later on you have an opportunity to tune back in, and it'll be really clear. So if you're missing something, don't think that, oh, it's trying to keep me from learning. Just know that you'll be able to get another copy later on that's clear. So let us begin with Ma'at, or Tiamat, the planet in its what we call pre-Earth phase. As we know that the planet was entirely covered with water, but not the kind of water you pull out of your tap today. Definitely not what they're running through the city systems. But water that is more like the fluid that is in a woman's stomach that becomes the ultimate fertilization for any seed that may find itself landing on that water. So our world, in the segment that I'm going to just take you through, would be completely sentient from the sense that being completely covered with water, and the entities that live within the deep water, known as chthonic or nighttime beings, were all collectively in a hive. And this is no different than what you of course see with the beehive, with the queen, but also what you see within the child inside of the matrix with other children in the matrix. A hive is a plural type structure, meaning that there's multiple beings inside the hive, and each person is moving based on the suggestion from the other being that is adjacent to them, meaning that in a hive, how the individuals think in the hive affect the whole hive. So more than anything of the hive, you have to identify the queen, because of course the signals begin from the queen and then trickle into the rest of the members of the hive. So in the ancient days, the hive queen was known as Mar, M-A-R, which just means ocean. You see Ma is in there. And this Mar later on became known as Mary, or the Black Madonna, meaning black like the abyss, or dark, again, a womb. So you have to realize that before this planet received light, let's first talk about what the light is. What light is formed or fashioned darkness. Raw energy or pure energy first comes as dark matter. Then when you begin to mold it, shape it, and cut it, if you have the ability to do this, which of course the human being does, then as you slice it, it gains light, just as with a diamond. If anyone's ever seen a diamond that is pulled out of a mine, it looks nothing like the diamond that ends up finding itself on the woman's ring finger when she's married. That diamond has been cut, as they call it, trillions of times. That's called a trillion cut. So it was necessary to shape and mold dark matter in order to get some potential out of it. And indeed, we are in a process of shaping and molding. Now, we are actually being presented with an opportunity to do much of the shaping and molding ourselves, so that we may see our own brilliance, not the brilliance that others want to see, but our brilliance. So, let us now talk about just some basic logic. This doesn't require you to get deep into spirituality, but some basic logic about numbers and what happens with populations, especially when structures have to be built. Let us look at some of the major structures of the world, such as the pyramids and also Angkor Wat, and many of the other structures around the world, some that are now underneath the sea. But if you understand what kind of power and energy and even man and woman power that it takes, or human resources that it takes to put such a structure together, even if you're moving blocks magnetically and through telekinesis, just the amount of individuals involved will let you know, from that time till now, the population of many of these indigenous cultures would be much higher than they are now if something didn't happen. Meaning that there is phenomenal proof that shows that there was a period in our earth where everything was reset. Some call that the deluge. So it's easier for us to go now with this deluge theme for a minute and say, okay, let us say that a lot of the population of the world got depleted. What would be the result of that? So let us start to examine, because I'm going to show you that obviously a large population of the world was depleted and a few individuals in different areas survived. In fact, let us go ahead and jump right into this story. What occurred is that there was a worldwide, what we would call a catastrophe, what the higher beings call a catalyst, meaning that something that has to stir up the primordial goo in order to bring about the new level of evolution that is being cooked underneath or under the pressure of the civilization or the strata. So our world faced a major wipeout, except for the highlands. All of the planet was pretty much sunk underwater for a period of time. The highlands, of course, being the Himalayas and some of the highest ranges on the earth, mainly, of course, the mountains. So moving from there, what you'll see is if you go with this idea that all of a sudden there was a depopulation, the first thing that would be lost is a great deal of how to fabricate, meaning how to really make something. I want you to ask yourself the question. If something happens to the world and you find yourself being one of the only survivors, can you build a rocket? Can you build a car? Can you build a microwave? Can you even build an iron? Can you even build a tool? Can you smelt? Do you know metallurgy? Do you know chemistry? Do you know how one particular bond acts on another? Now, I started to think about this very heavily because I wanted to move completely away from spiritual thinking and digging into the past of the ancients and just for a moment clear my mind and talk it out and see what would be the causes and effects. I surely have gotten smart enough at least to look at what are the causes and effects. So I started noticing, okay, this is what's been happening. Now, the main catalyst also, I will say, in bringing this information out for me actually was the Olympics. Because of looking at the Olympics, I was made to investigate things that I've never really looked deep into. And I started finding a lot of answers within the symbolism. So what really happened is, in looking at what these people proclaim as their history, because they're so noble, they're so aristocratic, that they have kept all of their records ever since what they claim to be their beginning. And this is what I mean when I'm talking about Sumeria. I'm talking about all the lore that surrounds the Sumerian lore and the Talmud and the Sephiroth and, even other planets and aliens they've spanned off into now. But through the recurring symbols, the only thing I kept seeing was a horned lord. That the horn or the crown symbolized that you ruled the kingdom, that you were the king. And your people were your kin, meaning your own family members. So I started to see how the symbolism tied together, but that was going too far in the future. I said, I need to know more about what went on in the past. And so I was taken into the insight of what happened. So after this catastrophe, the water begins to reside. And now the only thing is left is a bunch of people who only knew how to worship. Because just like now, we worship electronics, we worship all sorts of things. But we don't know anything really about them. So the people also then were confined to worshiping entities that were physical for them. They had arrived on their dimension and they told them, build us Angkor Wat, which is a heavenly resemblance of, a earthly resemblance of our heavenly kingdom Orion. Build us the pyramids. Build us. Mine for us. Now people think, oh wait, is this a Sumerian story again? Wait a minute. You're living in a reality of the Sumerian story. Go work for us. Go build our computers. Build our machines. It's making you smarter. We're helping you. You're expanding. No, you're not expanding unless you have the basics of how the earth works. Then you understand how you work. Then things turn on from there. The only thing this society is introducing is more confusion. So, in looking into things very deeply, I started to notice that those that survived the cataclysm were living in almost a nightmarish world. Because they didn't know how to form and fashion, they even came against. Let me explain something to you. Do you see, let's take a country like the United States before they did all of what they did to it, and all the trees and the redwoods and the springs and all of this stuff, right? There's no roads. There's no Circle K's, no 7-Elevens. And so you're in the thick of this as a species walking bipedal, meaning a human stands up straight. A human can only possess so much physical strength. So if you have no more tools from your advanced civilization that just got destroyed, you're stuck dealing with nature and the forces of nature. See, nature is just like the nature channel. Some of the animals, such as the big cats, they want tender meat, the baby. They don't care if it's a human baby. They don't care if it's the baby of a cow. They don't care if it's or a bison. They don't care if it's the baby of a giraffe. When the carnivores get hungry in nature, they feed. So here you have this species of man and woman migrating together and having to brave now a cycle. So the reason why it's important for me to bring this point up is because there were a group of individuals who had knowledge that this catastrophe was going to take place before it did. And many of those different groups prepared accordingly. Now, of course, I'm not going to take you right now into how Noah supposedly received this knowledge and how Enki supposedly gave this knowledge to the beings that he supposedly created on Earth. But I want to take you also into the Aztec text and show you the same thing happening there. The Aztecs have a glyph of the water covering everything. They show brothers in the water dying, and then one has built a canoe, and he's still trying to brave this on the canoe. I come here to give respect to all man and woman, because those who braved that, those who were able to surf the wave and start life over again from scratch, man, you got to understand the strength of our ancestors. But again, because there were many hallucinogenic power plants, those are man's power plants then, power plants on the earth, many people had seen through the timeline and saw this catastrophe. The matter was whether they could prepare for it or not. And because just like today, some civilizations had progressed further while other civilizations were held back within the dualities and quarrels that exist within inside of our very being. Some people were a lot more prepared than others. And this is why the kings and queens of your world now have the abilities that they do because they understood metallurgy only, which led to alchemy. If you understand how metals can bind and which metals don't bind, it's a universal knowledge, so you start understanding how chemicals bind and which ones don't bind. Then you actually graduate finally into how people bind and some don't bind. It becomes a universal system. If you can master anything, if you notice the title is always master, the master. What they're saying is if you can master anything that is truly worth mastering, you will become the master of all other things because it's a universal system. So, the Sumerians had a master who survived the flood. They depicted him as a fish. It could have been symbolic. It could have been that he just sailed on the sea, that he had a boat. And then so he was like on the ocean all the time. He never stayed on land. So he was a fish man. He was a fisher king. So, you see, when the knowledge was reaching the indigenous, meaning the people who they hadn't seen nobody, they were 2-3 generations after, or 4 or 5 generations after the catastrophe. Now you have degradation that has happened within the tribes. Even today, when you go into the indigenous tribes, there's a great degradation that has happened. They're not even on the same level of thinking as the apex man. And this is just things that have to be talked about. because they could be solved if we would address them. But they are humans running around as if they are almost subspecies, but still contain within them the great vehicle, the great arcanum, the chakra system, the wheels. See, all of this I'm telling you right now, do not think of it at all as being a disadvantage. Do not go into the level of being dismal. Understand that we are built with a system that allows us to make a crippled climb trees all of a sudden. Metamorphosize and transmute them rapidly. Being fruitful and multiplying. These are the abilities that are encased within you. Now, like I talked about, we have to unpack them. Unseal it is what I come to do. So, imagine these people, and like I talked about, I think on one of the groups, if someone rolls up to you right now with big boats, a little Bugatti, a little Ferrari, it acts like they even want to talk to you, you're going to be like, yo, what's up? Look for a new friend? So when those who have boats and those who have swords and shields and guns even rolled up on indigenous people, they were only ready to serve because they were already professional worshipers. Remember, what happened to them, they say, was a part of the catastrophe, which was the same ancestors that Daniel Winter is talking about, the ones that a plasma vampiric, meaning at some point they started to feed on their children. Like you look at Cain and Abel, run it together, Cain and Cannibal. Like it's right there in the two brothers in the Old Testament. There is a species on our planet that eats itself. Like it's the serpent eating its tail. So, let us go forward. You imagine that now there's one who has retained a great deal of knowledge. This is the Sumerian kingdom of Nimrod. This is how they were able to rebound so fast. The first thing they did was they began to develop the city in Babylon. They needed to regain the technology also. Remember, those who survived the flood, there were many who remembered some of the things they had before. They may have not knew how to build it or nothing like that, but they drew it and this was it, the flying thing, the screeching bird. Our ancestors told us about this. This is because all of that needed to be redone. Like one thing about electronics, which was still going on then, L is electronic or electric, is that once there's a ton of water, electronics are like that in the system of fire beats water, beats wood, etc. It's actually the electronics that get beat by water because they're not waterproof. So what I'm telling you is that now our society has continuously added all these components, and this has brought us to where we are now. But in the old days, things started in a slow process of many of the indigenous cultures just battling nature and understanding again how to become the master of nature to keep bears and cats and all that stuff from eating up members of the tribe. Then man became a lord of the jungle then. While another group of men were sailing the ocean, building weapons, looking for resources, looking for more answers to what is going on here. Can we reestablish what we had before? Now, I did put up the post recently about the explanation of the 2012 Olympics. So it's good to read that when you do get an opportunity because, again, to understand how to balance these chakras that we're dealing with now, this Swadisthana chakra, you have to understand the meaning of every single race and their importance in what they've done. This becomes a hard pill to swallow, as they say. Meaning that our history is full of blood, murder, usurping, fighting, the same species fighting and killing itself. That's cannibalism. Okay? It doesn't mean you just have to eat the person. You eat a person when you kill them. So that's what is happening here. So we recognize it. Can someone come forth with the cure for our species? Like some people are so stagnant in the mind, they think about this and they think about who did it and they get all mad and then they can't be used at all to cure the problem. Can someone that is listening to my voice find the cure for our species? Because I see the infection within everyone. I see the infection within myself. That's what it takes. It takes, look, man, this is how I was programmed. Now I can undo the program because I know I was programmed. Like that's the first point. Most of prophecy is things that have already happened. I look at these prophecies. This stuff has already happened. The problem with Nibiru, them losing their atmosphere, so having to take gold dust to spray their atmosphere, or use a contrail or a chemtrail to spray particles into the air to keep our atmosphere from collapsing. Our continuous expansion, they talk about Nibiru as continuous expansion that caused the breaking of its shields. Our plight on Earth with the continuous population of people being born that are not educated the proper way and don't know anything about how to obtain real space. Space. That's what you have to think about. You have to understand as a soul, the more space you feel like you have, the bigger you can grow. It's just like a fish. When you feel like you're under pressure, you become very small. You feel very small. So, this is a major part of your expansion, this message that I have to deliver to you today. Because in your mind, and even within crystalline networks, there is so much space to contain who you are. The ancient beings ran out of space at certain times to contain who they are. Their minds were so vast, but they even reached a capacity. So they were like, yo, let's put this in crystals. I don't want to hold all this in my mind. I need more room. The same thing you have with your computer. You keep needing more space. You've learned more things. You have more pictures. Then you try to compress some stuff. You try to archive some things. Why do we see the earth so different, and why can't we expand into the multiple levels of how to see things? That's where this bridge is. This is the bridge. That's why those who obtain mastery over the Swadisthana chakra contain mastery over their entire vehicle. Surely someone would say, well, what do you mean? It's the crown chakra. Nah. Crown chakra people don't like root chakra people. When the crown chakra people only get around or have to go out to root chakra people, it's horrible. It generally works out like this. Crown chakra people are really bougie. So when they end up in root chakra land, they're like, oh my goodness, I can't be around. Did they clean this? This is dirty. So you see, crown chakra people and root chakra people generally don't work out together. They have to have a bridge. You have to move from the center of yourself, which is your navel. That's the center of your universe. So let's keep going with this story, because I do, like I said, when I got a chance to, I've been dreaming about the story. Just putting the pieces together in lucid sleep. Just putting them together and putting them in action to see the occurrence. And then you see other things playing in the scene. Basically like the animals, the nighttime animals. And this is why there's this other nature to Earth. Because there's another force or a spirit that is here that corresponds with when it gets dark and a lot of the predators that are here. So going forward, that's also why you'll see that, of course, even in the Bible, Cain was scared of them too. He was scared of the nighttime forces of Earth. He said, if you don't, if you send me out here outside of this garden, then the ones that are out there are going to consume me. And then the beings he was dealing with said, no, they won't, because I'm going to give you this mark. Now, on multiple levels, that mark was a weapon, but, that's for another conversation. So, now what you have is a group of individuals that are catching steam fast. This is nowadays what we call the Illuminati, the Masons, the Sumerians, the Anunnaki, all the rest of that whole group. We're catching steam fast back in the days because now they have the ships. Every time they show up on the shore, all they find is people that were stranded since the deluge. It's the same game. They give them the new religion, try to upgrade them on the language. Most of the time these cultures don't have a written language. Go and check now. If you see, most indigenous cultures do not write down their language. And they use generally certain symbols to indicate what they want, which come out in tones. So basically, this becomes the difference between how many times can I say fast? I can say swift. I can say hurry. I can say a lot of different things. Versus there's only one word for fast in that language that they have. You see, like in their world, you just had to be fast. Because swiftness is the way to deal with nature. That's also why it's the way to deal with death. You have to be faster than death. Meaning your vibrational frequency has to be higher than death's frequency all the time. So, in nature, that's what they learned. But also that equaled them not expanding into things. Never asking the deeper questions. You see what I mean? So there's a cause and effect and a pro and a con. That's why in our world, when we bring all these together, we get the entire lesson. Like whoever has played the role, and you say, man, that's a bad person. Man, they played the role of being a bad person. If you're not a bad person, then be glad that you didn't have to play their role and learn from their role. As they will have to learn from yours. And then let us all go forth, the bad person and the good person both learn from their roles and went into what's created after that. When we start using all of these abilities that we have here on this planet, and I'm not talking about just the plants, and I'm not talking about just the monatomics. I'm talking about how our energy system works in order to connect this grid and really do this. See, people think it's a game. They think it's just a promise, that another unfulfilled promise, like one of these unfulfilled predictions that have been passed about the internet these days about El Niño and these kind of different things. But they have no clue that there's always been an effort to expand our race, our species. That we faced setbacks before, major setbacks. However, it is those who continue to stand up and keep walking with this, despite what they hear and what someone said and how programmed everyone is and, you know, how much symbolism and how much frequency. We keep pushing through this. And that's why I say persistence wears down all walls. So let me show you the surmising of the problem of the controllers. Because I'm not at all glorifying anyone. Now, if you read all of the Zachariah Sitchin work and all of the work that's done on the Sumerians and who they say they are and how they came from Nibiru and et cetera, et cetera. They had these huge aristocratic kingdoms out there, something like Dune, almost exactly like Dune, basically. And all of the politics that goes on when you can't trust anyone because if you turn your back, they're going to kill you and try to become the ruler. Because everyone in there is fully aware that they'll never become ruler unless they get rid of you. That's pretty much the gist of it. So, I do not subscribe to Sitchin's work about Nibiru. What I do subscribe to is the drama that the Sumerians have been through on this particular planet alone. And them simply creating a duplicate of their story that says that they're in space having their problem doesn't fly by me because I know enough of the history. So on this line today, you need to know these Sumerians do not come from outer space. The story that they're talking about is the story of what happened to them here on Earth. And their continuous plight. Now, again, two rulers. Two that want to be rulers and consistently against each other. Now, how I can, again, summon or surmise this entire Sumerian thing. This Sumerian and summoning all have to do with the same thing. Is this. The exact same story plays out in space that they later on record after they supposedly created humans and did all this genetic modification. Then it happens with the humans. With two individuals. These individuals are Anu in Alalu, this is the extraterrestrial story. When it gets to Earth, it's Cain and Abel. When it gets to Greece, it's Romulus and Remus in Rome. When it gets to Egypt, it's Osiris and Set. Every single culture has a variation of this same dualistic story between two people who want to rule that happen to be in the same family, since everyone is in the same family. Now, how this plays out in our own microcosm is that, have you noticed that two powerhouses have a hard time getting together? Like, put Cesarian in with or Daniel Winter with, maybe Dr. Stephen Brown, or, put the powerhouse together. But what happens is that for some reason it has a hard time connecting. Because each powerhouse has such a large field, trying to guide this field in, park it properly. It's very similar to trying to bring a huge planet into a solar system, meaning that it's so difficult to bring big people together because they have that gravity and they have that magnetism. And now their challenge is understanding how to come together so that the rest of the celestial bodies, or basically the rest of the individuals, can also start to come together and then start to compress the energy into a nucleus, which is basically a group of individuals that really understand the expanse of humanity. This is also what we're on the brink of. The moment that we see some of the petty quarrels that have been going on with a lot of the factions, like the Resistance and I guess Red Ice, there's tons of petty quarrels going on. Meanwhile, we're on the brink of total emancipation. And some of these petty quarrels are holding us up from that emancipation, which is really silly, because the emancipation itself, which of course every individual can go through, but we're talking about for the masses, the emancipation itself is expanded. Like, I'm just one of the individuals that took myself completely through cycling the energy. Imagine when tons of people start to do it. So here's also where we're at with what's preventing that. Now, I also noticed in the Olympics that there was a supreme domination in many of the categories by China. It's as if China could create a human that is perfect in completing one task, but not much more. You couldn't get much of a conversation. You couldn't get much of anything. And this is also where I see the so-called controllers so eager to create something that they could only put in one position. You're a doctor of the heart. That's it. You're a store clerk. That's it. You're just you. You see, so when they want to put you into one particular category, you gotta always be looking for the expansion. So anything that starts to limit you, you can only stay in, you only need the root chakra. You only need the heart chakra. When a person tries to confine you to these small dynamics of yourself, always burst forth and expand. Because I'm going to finish walking you through the story. What happened is that now you have one particular race, like I said, and they're winning the race in so many words. They started to develop the technology all over again. Then you do have still the two brothers, meaning that there's now another faction that also starts developing weapons and developing power too again. And this is the whole race that we're seeing right now, especially with the technology. Each country must race to keep creating new, more advanced things, to keep them either at par or ahead of who they have as their competitor, because they feel like if they get too far behind, then they will be destroyed. Now, who was at the head first? Just recently. It was Japan. Japan, or Japan, I mean, come on. It's in the word. And some people say Nippon. It's the same thing. So that technology over there, have you noticed Sony or Scion pushes out an entirely different type of product than even China? Japan, being as small as it is producing some of the most massive technology. So that's where they were tripped up in the race, is when the first bomb dropped. People haven't noticed that not only is Japan extremely far ahead, but it seems like they are the only ones that get the nuclear attacks. This is because they're moving so fast, there is a force that is constantly working to stop them from what they're developing over there. So people have to start thinking about what's going on around them, especially within the symbolism. You see there's a symbol of the sun itself as the flag in Japan. So what we're also going to do is we're going to start taking questions a little early in the call today, because I want to make sure that we get this call wrapped up by the time that we're over with time. We got about 46 more minutes left in the call. I'm actually going to take a brief break, refresh myself. I already have some people that have called in. I'm going to go back over this entire thing, because I know I went through it kind of fast, and but definitely with the flow of everything. We're going to also connect in some things such as the corn god. Remember that when these individuals arrived, what they were bringing is new kinds of grain and beings that were very resilient, because they had already they learned the technology from their fathers of how to increase the strength of grain and barley. So when they gave it to these indigenous people, such as the corn, it grew up so fast for them, they were like, this is it. Our God has returned. The corn god is here. And this, of course, later leads to the rites of Isis, etc. In addition to that, people have to understand that the ocean carries another type of sentient being there. Like, we would be foolish to think, if we're looking at this whale and then we're looking at this dolphin, that there's not other beings that are in the ocean that have reached levels of sentience that understand the surface, meaning that understand to stay out of the surface and to stay from being visible on the surface. Like, people need to understand that the reason why they're calling this the Fisher King is because later on there was a development of a city inside of the ocean. If you read certain books, I believe this is called Dr. Bishop Kanko and the Witch Doctor. In this book, pretty much all the knowledge that is of a deep level about what is going on in Africa, especially within the ocean, is revealed. Of course, the individual who wrote the book jumps out of the frying pan into the fire, because he seeks Jesus Christ as his refuge away from all of what he's invoked in Africa, or in what his fathers invoked. But he puts the story right on the line and says, yes, they live in the ocean, that these beings have the individual has the ability to tap the water in the ocean, and the ocean splits, the ocean opens up, just like what Moses showed in the Bible. And then they walk into these kingdoms that are under the ocean, even using astral bodies to do this. So, again, don't think that you know everything that is going on here. All you have to do is just start logically coming to conclusions. Okay, if they're using ethogenic plants, if they can see into the future at times, if they have access to the ancient knowledge, the ancient vibrations and tones, if they have the devices to build and fabricate, you just keep coming to logical conclusions, and then you understand exactly where you are. You can also understand what part you're playing in it, so that you can remove yourself from just being a part. See what I mean? Like, being a part of something doesn't allow you to be whole. That's why I come here to deliver this information to everyone. The gambit has already been ran, meaning that there are many individuals who've already emancipated themselves from the human plight of being a species that was completely destroyed, almost physically, meaning our populations went so low that our children became our most prized possession. People tuned into this call today to hear about professional reincarnation. It's not something really hard to understand. Our children are our professional reincarnation. In addition, you are your ancestors' professional reincarnation. but it wasn't so professional if you're asleep. What makes it a professional reincarnation is when you awake. Then you awake all subsequent versions of yous in balance. The only way they can awake is within balance. So we're going to return here in just a moment. Again, we're going to answer any questions. If anyone wants to call in and wants to talk about some of the deeper things, such as the covenant, how this took place physically between Solomon, also who's Cassiel, the angel of Saturn, and the Queen of Sheba, who's Bilqis or Venus or Aphrodite. How the Naga ruled over the kingdom in the chthonic hive. It's no mystery that Lemuria was ruled by Naga. Once they left the place of Nubia, after the covenant was made between the beings from Lower Egypt and then of course the beings from Upper Egypt, then they spread out into the world, becoming what we call today Indians. Those that look like they're from India. Those who look like they speak Tamil. You go here in Costa Rica and you look at certain people, they look like they're from India. Then you go to Peru, same thing happens. You go into Mexico in certain places, then you start seeing that, man, these people are all the same people. Yes, because they were migrating after the covenant. So the covenant of, again, also be fruitful and multiply. The seed that's strong enough to carry mankind and woman into the next age. Like, there's been a lot of work put into this. Some have numbers like 436,000 years of consistent work of getting us to the point that we are now. Let's not allow ourselves to capsize within our own potential. So we're going to return here in a moment. And we'll be able to take your call and get your questions answered. So let us go ahead and start with the first caller from area code 404. That's definitely Atlanta. You're on the 2012 show. Okay, that caller happened to disconnect. They'll probably call back in. We're going to go ahead and take the next caller from area code 916. I will ask everyone, if you're calling in, to be prepared to turn off your radio so that way we don't get any reverb or feedback. So from area code 916, you're on the 2012 show, Wholeness. Okay, caller from area code 916. I'm not sure if you're hearing us okay. I'm going to go ahead and come back to you, and I'm going to go now to caller from the area code 336. Caller from area code 336, you're on the 2012 show, Wholeness.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, brother. How you doing?
I'm doing great. This is Double O Cosmos, Ancient Fish Scale. How you been?
Oh man, it's been an excellent journey for me thus far.
Oh yeah, this far indeed. Well, I was calling in for the day. I was actually just listening, but since I am into a call, I did have a question. On the brain from a later date, it was about dealing with the biochemical cell salts, and I was just wondering, why are they missing? Like, why do we have 3 missing? Everyone, like, what is with the 9 months instead of 12 months?
Well, actually, I mean, the numbers start to overlap. Like, in the system of numbers, there's only 1 through 9. So let's, just kind of get that correct. When what you have is when you do have the extra 3 cell salts, it's like you're not even dealing really with numbers anymore. We're talking about elements. And so this is also where some people attempt to connect the universal system in with numbers where it doesn't apply. Like with Kabbalah, some people are saying with certain words, oh, this word means, let's say this word means Jesus if it was 1 more letter. So that means it's close to Jesus. That's not Kabbalah. That you have to have an exact definition. So with many of these subjects, especially the difference between chemical substances within the body and numerology, and how numerology really works, especially when it comes to a spiritual level, you can't connect it through numbers. You'll have to connect it through a much more deeper, more explanatory symbol. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense to you. So it's basically like you have to use another integer to determine the similitude between the two rather than just numbers, because in numbers you're not going to be able to find the complete connection. What happens with the cell salts is that there's 12 cell salts, and then all 12 of them mixed together makes bioplasm, which is the 13th cell salt. So some people could say that has everything to do with the zodiac and how the zodiac works. And then some people could say, well, you know, I don't know, why don't we have 9 months? And then why aren't we working with like a system of 9? And again, what I'm explaining to people is that, first of all, each system of thought that the world has had is like a ring. And that's why it's called like the Lord of the Ring, because each ring in essence is the cable or a cabal. And what this is a language. It's the full understanding of the language, and when you or a language. And so remember, there's other kind of languages. There's a language of thought, which cannot be written down. There's of course many verbal languages. There's also gestures, which is another language. So we're communicating all of the time. And it's just important to understand what we're really communicating. And I do want to give as a bulletin today, a Cymatics device has finally arrived. So, which is awesome. I'm actually here with it now. I haven't even got a chance to even put some sand on it or some salt on it to really start working with those frequencies. But I will let everyone know it has arrived. So we are now at the first point of really truly introducing the universal language from a sense of understanding what frequency, what number corresponds to what frequency, which is where people are really missing it in cymatics right now. It's like, so yeah, that's just a major thing that's going on right now. But
with the cymatic and language going in, since I do myself produce music and songs, so I'm definitely waiting to get one of those to see what I'm actually saying in vibrations. But another thing, going back to the little ones, the little kids, since we are spell casting and like you were saying, talking to ourselves, putting spells on ourselves, what is the language that we should use with the little kids, with the little ones, instead of the English dialect? Like, what would be something I can look up to start trying to use to reactivate or keep them activated and as in language instead of using the spell casting we're doing now?
Well, I mean, again, all this stuff is a positive and a negative effect, you know, depending upon the welder. So in spell casting, if we're using that term, when a person moves from the center of themselves, this is why just because you get angry at your child that day and you're like, man, I'm going to kill him because, you know, he's been throwing flour all over the kitchen, it doesn't mean you really mean that. And it doesn't mean that you're going to really bring about that child's death. You see what I mean? But and then the reason why it doesn't cause that is because from the center of you, what comes is, I'm just upset, but I don't really mean this. So there's actually another level of communication that we're doing before we actually say a word, which is, of course, the real thought behind it. So the first thing is, you know, because try to tell everyone you got to move away from English is almost insane at this point, especially since, again, English is an expansive language. You just have to understand English, and that's where it doesn't become destructive. If you don't understand it, it becomes highly destructive and highly Confucius. It's basic Confucius, because the reason is because English has all these different explanations for the same thing. That means that, you know, it's more expansive in a sense, but it's also easier to confuse a person if they happen to not know one of the words that you say. So this is why we want to work with another level of communication also, is because we get the ability to know the exact expression behind what we want so that it comes through with power. It's like if you want to manifest something but you got to wait 3 or 4 years to manifest it and you know it's on a positive level, that's not going to help the universe. So people should understand the universe is highly interested in individuals that can weld the energy to a positive effect for the dimension. It's just it's a talent within itself, though, because power or having the ability to do something also it collapses under the person's scars and emotional problems and psychological situations that have occurred with them in the past. So if the person hasn't had much attention, but they have come into some level of power, then they attempt to use that level of power to get them more attention. So, you know, this becomes more of a stumbling block to that individual than, you know, also the other individuals that, you know, with whoever they're doing it to. So what this is about moving fast, in the sense that if you give something to someone that it really starts to work with them inside, even beyond words. Like right now, I'm just trying to explain it to everyone, but the goal here is to create something that it gives it to them. Like at least that's where I'm going. At least that's where I'm going also with my work, as far as what I really want to produce for humanity, just within myself. The resistance in itself in the Code of Matrix started off with a gesture of wanting to do something very good for humanity. It's still going to continue that way, but now I'm starting to understand more that what is good for humanity may not be necessarily all the time me jumping on the radio. It may be an invention, and everyone needs to think about this. That is very intelligent. They should understand that you have to dedicate the time to the cure, also more than always citing what the problem is, etc. But both need to work in some level of balance. And so this is just an awesome time.
I could bring me to my next question is bringing it back to inventions, and I was reading one of the on your Beamers you had, the demos. You had was it Dr. Robert Blake, and talk about inventions and stuff with the EMS. And I was about that, you know what I'm saying, once we get ourselves up to vibrations and clean, you know what I'm saying, are those good machines actually make for the fam and people you care about, instead of having them own all of these other man-made assassinations?
Yeah, I mean, how it really works is it's really a resonance thing also. So once you get a chance to have an opportunity to start to harmonize, like if you do it for let's say you tap into the chakra itself because you understand the symbol and the frequency behind the chakra, then you start to see the vision of what is keeping that chakra blocked for you. So notice this is still highly subject to the individual figuring out also what's going on inside of them. So then once they see it, then they're able to, the vibratory purging happens. And then what you feel inside is more like, you can even feel it vividly. It's like a turning begins to take place, like a spiraling. And you can mainly feel this when you wake up, like when you just wake up out of sleep, because your chakras they're such a part of while your organs are a part of your physical body, your chakras are more a part of your spirit body. So right before you wake up, you're more into your spirit body per se. Your consciousness is more in the spirit body. So you'll feel vividly this vibration or frequency thing or buzzing going on with your body when you have at least one chakra system online. And for those who are not experiencing that, of course, that's what this whole thing is about. I want to tell you that people vividly feel this energy and are able to expand in so many ways with this kind of energy of themselves. It has no limits on it at all. But it's a real thing. That's what I really want people to know more than anything, is that if you're not feeling it, it's not because it doesn't exist in you. It's just because that there's a troubleshooting that you have to do in your life to see, okay, what is exactly keeping me from vibrating, so that way I can get onto my next level of my expansion. Like, I think more than anything, people have to think about, look, I don't have to wait until after I die. I don't have to, wait until someone else comes back, or, I don't have to wait is the key here. But it's going to now depend upon how quick you are. Now you begin the race. You're now starting the Olympic, as they would say. You're going to now go through the wheel.
And I would like to thank you. And just all of us and myself, I would just like to thank you for all that you do for us here on the Resistance, and give us opportunity to bring ourselves into awareness and all wholeness.
Oh man, I definitely appreciate that. I would say it's also likewise. Like, there's definitely a symbiotic relationship between me and the Resistance faction and all the family. I mean, we've indeed become like family. We talk to each other. We speak a lot. We talk about this situation. And we also compare thought with a lot of stuff that we're receiving. And because you just have so many people in the Resistance that are from different parts of the world, they oftentimes, like I got a link for a gentleman by the name of Nikolai Levashov. Started looking into his work a little bit, or the Slavic Vedras. And I just was noticing the presentation. That was more of what I was impressed by. The information was, of course, very expansive, so I didn't have a chance to cover all the information. But just the presentation in itself, and just how you can see people are working all the time. Unfortunately, he lost his life about 2 months ago. But people that are working constantly on what they feel is the expansion of consciousness. So I also think that in a sense, because we're like here alive and ticking, also from many different cultures, like, man, we have to wake up some of these cultures because they're really the strength to this entire movement. Like, we have a lot of crown chakra, namaste, love and light people involved in the movement, and they're working on the ethereal levels. But man, we need those really strong foundations also that work on the physical frequencies, and to be able to bring up this foundation for real. And that's what I believe also the resistance is heavily involved in, is working with individuals that may not be the prime candidate for Catholic choir. You know what I mean? Something of, you know, this whole perception of how spirituality is supposed to be, which was, of course, given to us by individuals that have no other agenda than to continue to keep us suppressed. So, what about, Cosmos, you got any more questions? I know there wasn't any more callers that called in. Actually, a caller did just call in from area code 202. So if you don't have anything else, brother, I'm going to go ahead and take that call, but I definitely appreciate you calling in as always.
Oh, no, thank you very much.
No doubt, no doubt. Okay, Wholeness. All right, caller from area code 202, you are on the 2012 show, Wholeness.
Wholeness, big brother, how are you, man?
Man, I'm doing it here, live and present, and I feel jubilant.
I love it. As I'm stretching now, it just occurred to me just like this, that what's in the mind will venture down to the heart, you know, at times, and what's in the lower regions will venture up to the navel. But the space between the navel and the heart, you know, is almost like a, you know, like a, I don't know, if two forces were sizing each other up before they decided to dance.
Exactly. I mean, I guess.
Fascinating, but that's just what occurred in my mind. As is the navel an actual meeting point, or is that like, you know, I just need some clarity.
That's interesting that you mentioned it like that. That's how more the richer texts explain it as a dance that must be done between these two energies, and it's just amazing to watch how many times that they circle each other, though. It's like I've watched myself personally wrestle with ideas. It's also not so much as a dance than a wrestling match too, where, you know, the two energies are battling one another, and so you could see so much that's not only going on in our internal and external world. Then while you're watching it, you can actually pull out of all of it, and that's when you become the product. You see, when you become the child that's ready now to grow from it. It's like, I believe when you're in a matrix, you can't see much of what's going on outside of the matrix, obviously, unless you understand how to have your own inner light, as it would be. It's like a spectrum light that shines from you, that you can guide yourself with it. It's like a fish in the ocean that has its own light. So in that essence, if you can now radiate that so much that it starts to basically light up other people's equipment too, now you're talking into the levels of what I know 100% is the expansion for this planet. Like that, if some people want the details to what is the awakening going to be like, that is what it's going to be. The Kundalini energy is contagious. It does spread to individuals, and it shakes off all fake characters. Me and my wife were sitting down thinking about how just everyone at times operates on this program when they start to talk to you at first. They have certain things that they say. It's a certain protocol that goes on. And it's not even them, though. And it's like, when is the last time, and that's what I was talking about in the professional reincarnation, it's like, when is the last time that we have truly spoke with ourselves? Like, we keep speaking to these parts of ourselves. But it's like this next level of our expansion is actually seeing, you know, exactly all of the parts of us. And this is also why our story is so important, because if you don't get the story of how we basically climbed out of the sludge again, how everything was destroyed, like some people would easily have gave up. If you think about it, it's almost like when you build a whole house and then the next day a tornado comes and knocks it down. At every point in your life, you're always building. So at any point, if you lose everything, you're going to feel like you lost everything that you built. So the main thing is that they didn't lose us. That's why, how could you lose yourself? But look at the term. What happens when they say you lose yourself? You see what I mean? So our life is such a testament to so many different levels of expansion. You can see why the universe would be interested in Earth's story. Like, Earth's story is so interesting, even from the aspect of people just figuring it out at this point. It's like, that adds another ring to the story. And all this stuff was going on, and guess what? They didn't even know. And then someone's like, are you kidding? How could they not have known that they were this, that, and the other? You see, so it's like almost like a cosmic storybook. And now again, we see, this is another part of the conversation. Let me explain to you how the first levels of reincarnation were done through anchoring points, mandalas, drawings, that allowed the individuals, that's why they practiced the same culture, because your culture became your anchor. It ensured that you ended up back here. You see? So it's almost like the ancestors were not as eager to just get somewhere where they didn't know where they were going to go. The first thing they wanted to do was figure out how to get back here, which I think is really a lot smarter than what we're doing. So they figured out how to get back here. They figured out how to keep a culture within your children so that your children can always tap into you. You see what I mean? And it should never be a disconnection, actually. The cultures weren't taught to support disconnection. That's another level of the problem, is because most of the text never talks about after we got disconnected how to reconnect ourselves. So the information that is coming forward now, of course, is how to get connected back to the tree. So that way you can...
I hear you. I think one of the most important things for me is to remember to think that no restrictions, as far as expanding. I'd say this a lot, but as far as expanding constructs, it's like whatever construct I think I'm in, then I have to exist in a greater construct. And how endless, is the setup, the concentric circle. How far does it go? How, small does it, get?
Right.
As you proceed towards the center, or you go out from the center.
Right.
So it's like, still, developing the models in my mind that, as you said, act as anchor points. But, I think it is the work of results, and I've heard you say this, and so now I guess it's boomeranging back from my mind, but just the results, like this, it's the merging of two spheres is the vesica that's formed from those two, and that's the result. And it's like Earth seems to be known for her results, like she's going to produce results at some point. So.
Yeah, and I think that everything has that point also where it produces something, whether it's a fruit or whether it's waste. And it's like now that, we're just in an entirely different position. Nature functions continuously doing what it does. We think about whether we want to do it or not. Sometimes we don't want to produce. You see what I mean? So it's like it's still another level beyond nature that we're already at. And this is our continuous expansion. And I also noticed another sidebar to this is that in the Sumerian story, it actually says in the encounter between the Sumerians and what was the quote-unquote being they used to manipulate and genetically modify, that they recognized in that being that was them, but only in a previous stage of the evolution. So it really, the whole story collapses on itself right at that point. It's showing you that the space version of what the Sumerians did is still the Earth version of what's going on. And in the sea, when someone comes from the sea, this means someone comes from this, in the physical world over the sea, but in the spiritual world, space, the unknown. Like, that's why I also keep saying, like, if you notice how the ocean, you don't just go jump off in the ocean and go dive, and we don't see you for like 5-6 minutes, and you go all the way down there and you just hang out, and that's where you are, and that's where you hang out, basically. That's not your culture. You see what I mean? So if you notice the word culture, it's like, in the lab, they say that's a culture, a petri dish. That the culture in the petri dish, that determines what grows in there. So our language and our culture determine who we become. So this means that you have to accept what you become based on your language and culture, and then at that point be willing to open yourself up to more languages and more cultures by but also using a simple system that you want to expand. You don't want to go backwards. Some of the older languages are very confined to the new mind. If you teach someone, let's say Arabic, and they knew only English before, it confines them more in their mind because Arabic is more of a confined language. It was developed by individuals that stayed together very close. So notice also when a language is more expansive, the people split apart more. But this same splitting apart is like pollination. It's like what causes more seeds to grow and spread out, because or else we will all stay huddled underneath each other, right? Like in most cases, like any time you think of a futuristic city, all of everyone is in one bubble together. Huge mega structure, city, village, or whatever, jungle, whatever, but everyone is there together, right? So, exactly. So this is the whole idea of everyone that is alive actually stays and knows each other, but that's not what's happening now. Like there's so many people you don't know and I don't know. So this is, of course, the difference between one society and another. Notice that's the really only two differences. A society that is completely together in all their endeavors, and in a society that has been separated by even, that's my neighbor's house and this is my house. And then there's a wall up right there just to prove that there's a separation between you and them. See what I mean? So we've accepted both of these things. And that's why, again, the product is going to be interesting in itself, because humans are made up of both of that. They put walls up, and then sometimes they open up those doors when they fall in love or when they express their true emotions, etc. So again, the potential to this is magnificent if we can get the inventors to continuously invent. Meaning that the society does need assistance with what is the damage that it's already taken. And that's what we're talking about. It's like getting people back into the dream, getting people back in the alkaline, getting people to understand, look, the earth is 7.83 hertz. So that means that when you go to sleep, if you drop anywhere below 7.83 hertz, you're going to Earth's underworld. And that's just common sense. So if you have something that you don't need to pay 40 million hertz, you're trying like, I'm going to overdo it. But if you have something that then maintains at least, I believe it's 12, 13 hertz in the sound in your room, it doesn't even have to be loud at all. It keeps you, once you synchronize with it, it keeps you out of the lower regions. So what we're talking about is we're talking about an individual that actually begins to choose where they want to go, even in the dream. See, the moment that we get control of the dream, and this is what I'm working on heavily now, is to give people the control of the dream. Once they have control of the dreams, then it becomes the control point to everything that exists with them. And they have complete control over it. There's nothing that can be in their dream that they don't allow to come in there. And anything that does, they can promptly dismiss. Then in their physical life, they'll begin to do the same thing rapidly. Also, in regards to energy and manifestation, I'll repeat it again. People have to understand, especially for males, that your manifestation and energy and currency is tied into your Kundalini system. If you can accomplish, and it's not easy, but if you can accomplish bringing your fluids at least into the navel chakra area, all of the financial problems disappear. But this is not a carrot in front of...
Very true.
That
very true.
Exactly. I mean, that's how it works. And then, of course, for the female, the dynamic of the female, and that's also why we need more people to continuously work, or at least work on other systems, because the female system is completely different than the male system. She has to be around like wombs, basically, because she is connected. That's the other thing, like the woman intuition and her actually being connected already just by the womb is something also that has worked for and against us. It's like if woman is not at least having trees and things around, then her womb has nothing to actually emulate in order for her to basically cause inner flora and fauna. You see, so, we got some dynamics to introduce. And then this is what you can also see what makes our future a totally different future from the one that we're living now, which is really the whole goal of the universe anyway. The universe just wants change. It wants to see the metamorphosis. So the metamorphosis for us becomes before we were asleep, so we did certain things. When we awoken, we changed all those things, and then this is what we became. And then, we keep moving with this. I mean, at least that's what I'm into. And then the other thing about this is that I consider heavily others because of this professional reincarnation, knowing that all is self and self is all. We work heavily, and anytime that we feel like that we can't gain the energy for some reason, we think of our brothers and sisters, our elders, our mothers, our grandmothers that are here that can't even accept what you're saying right now. It's like when I think of some of my family members, this is not even a conversation that we can have, but that makes me want to work on their behalf even more, not less, because I'm like, okay, we need to get them somewhere and at least make sure that they're safe, and then help them work out of this psychological Manchurian situation that they've been put under. You see what I mean? A lot of us see our mothers and our fathers in this situation. And that's what I was also saying about being the adept in this, because the adept is not going to allow this to go on with their mother and father. The adept is not going to allow this to go on with their child. And if anyone has allowed this to go on and they call themselves adept, then they're not adept. That's what the whole key to this is that when you understand the Lord and the Lady, which is the ones who basically grafted themselves onto the tree. That's what it says in the book, that they weren't on the tree before. When you graft yourself to the tree, this is what it means. Tree grafting is when you can take an orange tree and then stick it onto another citrus tree and it'll grow, of course. I'm just explaining that for people who don't know. So why would the controller say that that's how they put themselves into Earth's basically prerogative and lifestyle? Because that is what happened. They grafted themselves, meaning that they were another species per se, but were symbiotic with us and entered into our womb, our sphere, and began to reproduce also. And now we grow up alongside them. So people say, well, who is that? It's that. The thing you keep saying is the other thing. It's already, because we're all sharing the same quote unquote biodome, their mind is our mind. They say an image, but an image is not the thing that's projecting the image. The image is the product of what is being projected. So it's like with our minds now and our conflicts, we have to basically shut off the projector. It's like, okay, this projecting thing is one thing, but this action thing is totally different. If I say, hey, meet me tonight on the astral plane, you may have a hard time getting there. But if I say, hey, meet me tonight at the Georgia Dome, that could happen. You see what I mean? Like, because on the physical reality, we have the power to make manifest whatever we want instantly. See, they're playing with our minds in the sense of telling us that we can't manifest things instantly into the environment because we do it all the time. There's just levels to it. And that's why I started splitting a lot of what people know into levels. It's like, okay, you're at that level of understanding. Here's the piece that you need. And this is what Cymatics teaches you also, because I'm sure this breaks down to probably 8 or 9 tones. And no matter how high or how low you go into the scales of frequencies after that, you're only reduplicating the same thing. You're just creating more waves of it. And that's why I was saying the Cymatics thing is powerful, because it's an adinkra. It's the language that is spoken that is like the hidden language, for better lack of words. It's what they could not never tamper with, because the sheer complexity behind the design alone would evoke more than what they end up wanting to do with the potential of the symbol. Symbols are very limited. Like if you show a person a cross, it's still very limited to 4 and gates and straight lines, etc. It doesn't have that much explanation, but a dinkra can actually bring forth an entire species. It's like one symbol can bring forth the entire metamorphosis of another part of you. And so, again, I see this as this. I'm racing to complete this. Once humanity gets ahead into understanding that this is the way that they were already developed, boom. The potential of this I can't even talk about because I don't know. And that's where we have to go, because like it breaks down to, again, something very simple: space. Right now, people feel like they're crowded. They have to live in certain kind of living. They're around other people, etc. But the solution is not to get away from each other on a physical level. In fact, we need to come together more on the physical level. But in the mind, there needs to be more space. And your dream shows you how much space you have. That's what the dream is really about. Because if people and things are interacting with you in your dream all the time, and you can't even like get any sleep because this is going on, this means they're now encroaching upon you. You have to be able to, as you see in the projection, clear the entire thing out, that it becomes so vast that you can drop anything into it. We can drop the Himalayas in there. And then walk up to the mountain or fly up to the mountain and then meditate there. Some people say, well, that's not the same as doing the physical life. You're right. It's actually better. Because the air there is much more pure. Meaning that in the dream world, all of what you're creating at that point only has just the components of what it really is. Surely it could not be better in the physical reality, because the physical reality suffers decay. So I'm going to go ahead and get to another question, brother. I do thank you for calling in. As always, you always stimulate that the extra special conversation. No doubt,
as
brother.
always.
No doubt.
All right.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and take another call from a caller from area code 609. We got a few more minutes in the show, so I'm just going to go ahead and answer the call. And then answer the question rapidly. Wholeness. Area code 609. Okay, looks like area code 609 may be having some phone trouble. We're going to go ahead and take this last caller who's calling from area code 813. Caller, you are on the 2012 show, Wholeness.
Hello, James. It's Vanessa. How are you?
Good day. How are you?
Good, good, man. I traveled a long way. I'm settled. So I have a very relevant question in regards to traveling and lucid dreaming.
Uh-huh.
As you know, I've moved about 1,200 miles west, and I heard your recording on Truth Frequency Radio with Dan Winter. That was awesome. Anyway, so I heard you say that when you move from place to place, there's like this lapse in lucid dreaming, and I'm experiencing that. So I heard a little bit about mapping your bed, figuring out the magnetic lines, and I'm still looking into how to do that. But do you have any other recommendations as far as tapping into lucid dreaming again?
Sure. I mean, from what I discovered after my complete research, I just understood that there were several devices, not only within the house, but also in the frame of the house and devices in the room that needed to be grounded properly. And this is what and also the magnetic lines, if there could be any found, needed to be mapped in a certain way into a spiral. So just to kind of clear that up, I did pull an app off of iPhone, but of course not everyone has iPhone, but it is on AppZilla 2, and it's called the Tesla meter. It measures magnetic lines in the room, and so you can just kind of go around the corners of the room and see what it's reading. And then when you find the high point, you take something organic. I just use magnets because I have long hematite magnets, and you run basically a spiral into the room and try to put that spiral into the bed area. So basically the whole concept here is you understand your map, so you understand where you're traveling first. It helps. And again, looking at the hands, for those that are aware of that technique, look at the hands before you go to bed, then try to look at your hands and remember to look at your hands in the dream. Now, the magnetic mapping, of course, is a little bit more complex in the sense that you do have to find those magnetic lines, and you do have to get something organic to put in the room, and then you have to figure out how to keep that away from, whether people are like, okay, what is going on in here? Or, having it in the way of when you're trying to operate in your room. But it is something that we've been using during sleep, and it has definitely improved the sleep world. I don't know if I'm answering, again, the question directly, but does that make sense to you in regards to... I of course, have a countdown going on here, a little bit of I'm not even sure if you can hear that, but does that get the question answered for you in regards to the magnetic mapping?
That was perfect. That's all I needed to know. Thank you. Talk to you later, James.
Okay, awesome. All right, so we're going to go ahead and close the call now. We have expended the time. It was also a great conversation. Of course, when we come back in about 2 weeks, we're going to be uncovering something entirely different. Hopefully, by the end of this week, we would have worked through this chakra completely, also known as the lovers, sometimes quarreling but still needing each other. The reality is for all of us is that we have to keep working through these chakras. It is our responsibility. If we decide to take off for any reason, we still will have to come back to it. So we have this opportunity to all do it together. I'm, of course, here for you all the time, inside and outside of time. Wholeness.